Hey guys, my name's Sangeeta. I'm here to help you all earn your Coding for Good badges as we're all here at home. And so before we get started on Scratch, let's just take a second to think. What comes to mind when you think of the word coding? Maybe you've heard of the word programming. They mean very similar things, right? So let's take a second to pause, maybe talk about it with your mom, dad, or sibling about just what you think coding is. Maybe have a little bit of a discussion, okay? Okay, so now that you might have talked about it with somebody, coding is very simply put, giving computer instructions on how to complete a task. So your code itself are those instructions, and the computer will read them step by step in order to complete the task. And so when we're writing those steps, we need to be very clear, and we also need to make sure they are broken down into as simple steps as possible. Because computers, in reality, aren't the smartest. The code that's added to them is what gives them the ability to actually do all these awesome things that computers can do. Maybe do math, play music, take us to different websites. You probably played games on your computer before, right? All of that's powered by code. So today you guys are gonna make a game in Scratch, and you're gonna actually use blocks. Maybe you're familiar with the website or not, but they basically look like little puzzle pieces that we're gonna drag across the screen in order to place in a certain order to complete the game that you guys are gonna make today. But before you do that, before we head over to Scratch, I want you guys to check out Google Classroom and watch the first video link that I have posted. It's called the Code Stars film, and just watch the first one. The last two we're gonna save for the very end. So there's 3 links total. Just watch the first one, pause this video, watch the Code Stars film, and then once you're done with that, head right back here, and then we'll figure out how to build our game, all right? So let's take a look at what project you guys are going to be building today. So before I hit this green flag, which is how we're going to start our game, let's go over what each of these characters do. So first off, this sprite cat is going to be moving around the screen by us hitting the arrow keys on our keyboard. So obviously you guys can't see me hitting my arrow keys, but when I hit the up arrow key, sprite cat can move up. When I hit the right, he move right, left, and down. So I'm doing this with the arrow keys on my keyboard. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get my sprite cat to hit this crystal. I'm trying to get these two to collide. I'm trying to get them to touch each other. Okay, and so when they do touch, a sound will play. It'll sound like this cat is meowing. And this diamond over here is actually going to be randomly bouncing around the screen to make it harder for both of these characters to touch. And in the meanwhile, whilst we're trying to get Sprite Cat to touch our diamond, this parrot is actually going to be chasing Sprite Cat. So this parrot is actually going to be programmed. You guys are going to add code to do this. It's going to actually kind of know where Sprite Cat's location on the screen is. So to show that, let's hit the green flag to start our game. And notice how as I move my Sprite Cat around, the parrot changes the direction that it's traveling in to face our cat. And it is a little slower than our cat, but if we let it get too close, a sound plays. So another sound plays. And now let's hear the meow. So the meow plays when I get to hit my diamond. All right, so now I've headed over to Scratch. I've headed over to this link, scratch.mit.edu, and I've logged into my account. There should be login information on Google Classroom to help you create an account in case you need some help with that. But once you've created your account and you're at this website, I'm going to hit create to start a new project. So we're going to start building Gem Chase from scratch. No pun intended. Together. We're going to start from the beginning together. All right, so really quick, I'm just going to give it a name off the bat. I'm going to call it Gem Chase. Okay. And over here, I just have the completed version of the project. But for starters, you can grab a backdrop of your liking, and you can grab any 3 sprites. It doesn't have to be Sprite Cat, the crystal, and the parrot. Those are just the ones that I chose. So I'm going to grab the crystal. It is called crystal in the library. So this is how I headed to the library. I clicked on this blue screen in the bottom right corner,
And you can draw your own sprite if you would like to do that. You can hit surprise. I'm just going to pick one from the library that they already have. So I'm going to scroll down, and here's the crystal that I'm going to use. All right. And then I'm also going to go back in and grab the parrot. And I just typed it in the search bar to make my life a little easier when it came to finding it. While you're at it, to spice up your game a little bit, let's grab a backdrop too. We have a ton of options. Very similar. You can also draw your backdrop like we mentioned earlier with the sprite. Sprites, by the way, are the characters that are on our screens. So these are guys that we can actually add code to. You can add code to backdrops as well. So let me just grab one real quick. No, it looks good. So you can add code to each of these specific sprites. I can add code to my Parrot, which is what we'll do in a certain second. And I can also grab code here and do it with my backdrop. So maybe I want to have multiple backdrops and tell them to change, or I can change color effects. I can do lots of fun stuff. But today we're going to focus on adding code to our sprites themselves. And guys, this is super important when you are adding code. Make sure that you're clicking on the sprite that you're trying to add code to. So I don't want to add code to make sprite cat go up, down, right, and left with my arrow keys, but have this crystal highlighted in blue. So if I'm trying to get sprite cat to have code, got to click on that. That's super important because sometimes what might happen is you click on the wrong sprite and you add the wrong code in the wrong spot, and suddenly it looks like things aren't working when in reality you probably didn't do anything wrong with your actual code. So be careful with that. So for starters, let's just get sprite cat moving with our arrow keys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to events. Now events are basically what the computer is checking for to trigger a start. It's what it's looking for to have at the beginning of most of your scripts. Scripts, I will explain in just a second, but they're basically sections of your code. And without one of these sort of event blocks, your computer is probably not going to run the code. So it's checking for one of these certain situations to happen in order to run the code that we're going to place underneath. So first, how I want my sprite cat to know that it needs to trigger its movement, how it knows it needs to start moving in a certain direction, is I'm actually going to grab this one space key press block. Well, I can click inside of this rectangle here, and I can get a whole menu of a bunch of other keys that I can check for in case they're pressed. So since we're trying to move with our arrow keys, I'm going to grab the up arrow option, and I'm going to drag it over into my workspace. This is your workspace. This is where you're going to place all your code. And I'm going to change it for each direction. So since there's 4 directions, I'm just going to grab 4 of these off the bat. And right now, since there's not any code attached to them, see how it kind of looks like there's room for us to attach this block underneath? They kind of look like they fit together. But since there's nothing there right now, nothing's going to happen if I were to hit these arrow keys. But that'll change very soon. So I've grabbed them for all 4 directions. So let's start with probably getting sprite cat to move up in the up direction. So what we're going to do is, since this has to do with sprite cat moving across the screen, we're going to look inside of motion blocks. These are the blocks that are going to actually get our sprite to move, go in different spots on the screen, do lots of fun stuff, turn in directions. I want it to face the direction that it's moving in and then move in that. So what that means is, again, we're trying to break down things that to us seem simple into even more simple steps for the computer to understand. So when we think about that, we think, okay, it has to turn, face what direction it wants to go in, and then take steps in that direction and move in them. So the way we're going to get it to first face what direction it wants to move in is I'm going to grab this point and direction block. I'm just going to attach it right underneath this up arrow key. See how it kind of has a shadow, and when I let go, they'll fit right together. And so then I'm going to click inside this white circle, And any way that this arrow is facing is what direction SpriteCat will face in when I hit the up arrow key. So I'm gonna have this arrow face straight up because that's how I want it to move. That's the direction that I want SpriteCat to move in. So it's pointing in that direction, but it's not gonna go anywhere. So I'm gonna hit my up arrow key, see how it changes to face up, but it's not going anywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, it knows where to go or how to go there. Now let's give it the actual capability to move in that direction. So that's why I'm going to grab that move 10 steps block and telling it where to go and how to get there. I'm just moving these blocks around to give me a little bit more. So now I'm going to hit the up arrow key and it moves up. So now let's add some code to the other 3 directions to get it to travel that way too. So I'm going to grab another point and direction block. This time I'm trying to get it to move down. And also it's super important, make sure that you're paying attention to what arrow key you're actually adding code for and the direction that you're using. So I want to make sure, since it's up arrow key, I want to absolutely make sure that this arrow is facing up. I don't want it to be facing down or right, because then it's not going to move the right way when I hit that arrow key. So this time I'm trying to get it go for the down arrow. So let's move this arrow to be facing straight down and grab another move 10 steps block to tell it to go in the down direction. So now I'm going to hit my down arrow key again. You guys can't see this, but no, I'm clicking the down arrow key on my keyboard. And now it's moving down. And you'll know that a script, I mentioned that word earlier, a script is basically each beginning section of your code. So essentially, right now I have 4 beginnings. Event blocks are typically your beginning of your code. All right. So each section, each portion of these blocks that are in their own little spot is a script. So I can grab this from the top and I can move this whole script around. It's just each individual set of directions. So, or instructions, you could think about it, right? These are the instructions to get it to go down. This is the set of instructions to get it to go up. And we're going to add some instructions to get it to go right and left as well. So each set of instructions is each cluster of blocks that you're going to have. And when you grab from the top, you can move them all together as a unit. When you grab from the bottom, you can separate them. All right. So let's keep going and add something for our right arrow script. So I'm going to grab another point and direction block. I'm going to click inside this white circle, and it looks like it's facing directly to the right already, which is awesome. Grab my move 10 steps block. Boom. I'm going to test out with the right arrow key. And when a script gets highlighted like that in yellow, that's how I know it's running. So notice how my up arrow key and down arrow key scripts aren't getting highlighted in yellow like that. But when I do hit up, that gets highlighted, and I hit down, and that script gets highlighted. So when it gets highlighted like that in yellow, that's when you know that code is running. The computer is reading them, and in turn, performing, it's doing the task that you've told it to do. All right, so let's get our last one going. For left, I'm going to grab this here, attach it, and I'm going to make my arrow key face left. Let's grab one for move 10 steps as well. All right, so let me test that out real quick, and it looks like SpriteCat's moving just fine. So I'm going to move this to the left. And notice how SpriteCat can go off the edge of the screen. We don't want that. We want to always be able to make sure where SpriteCat is. So a very simple fix to that is, because I want to always be able to see SpriteCat, I don't want him to disappear on me like that. Let's grab like the if on edge bounce block. So what this is going to do is it's going to tell SpriteCat this edge of the screen, even if I were to make it bigger, this whole edge is now essentially a barrier. It can't move past it, okay? And we want it to bounce off that edge regardless of what direction that it's already moving in. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to place it at the end of each of my scripts, each of my clusters. And just a little refresher, our event blocks are what those specific situations that the computer is looking for in order to start running the code that we placed underneath. So it's checking for a specific situation in the sense of, is the user hitting the up arrow? Is the user hitting the down arrow? Is the user hitting their right? Is the user hitting their left arrow? All right, so when it's checking for these situations, even see how it says when left arrow key pressed, you can check when green flag clicked, when the sprite's checking for when something is happening, whether a key is getting pressed, whether green flag is being clicked, whether the sprite is being clicked. When that certain situation happens, it knows to actually look at the code that's placed underneath. But if this situation isn't happening, when the key isn't being pressed, it's not going to run the code underneath here. All right, so looks like I placed that underneath all of those situations that I have it checking for, and now he can't go past. I see how it's continuing to get highlighted in yellow, so it shows that I keep trying to move to the left, but it won't let me, and you can kind of see him bouncing off a little bit. See, it's a little bit of a barrier. All right, so we've gotten Sprite Cat moving. There's one more thing. You may or may not have noticed in the completed version of this, as I'm moving Sprite Cat around, it kind of looks like his legs are moving, kind of looks like he's walking, right? So we're gonna do that too. Now, what that is, how we get the legs to move like that is something called animating. You might have heard of that word before, animation, animating. All that is a way for us to change what this character looks like over and over and over again. And as the way they look changes, it also makes it look like they're performing a certain action. In this case, it might be walking. That action might be looking like they're moving their legs. So what we can do is basically, we can hit this costumes tab. And that means different versions of what the same character can look like. So I'm going to click on the other costume. And notice how as I switch between these two, we're not adding any new code right now. I'm just showing you what it looks like when Sprite Cat is moving his legs. As I keep clicking between these two costumes, if I click a little faster, it does kind of look like he's moving his legs, right? So what we can do is we can add some code here to tell it to constantly switch its costumes every time we hit our arrow keys, every time we tell it to move. And as it moves and it switches those costumes, it'll look like his legs are moving, and in turn, it'll look like Sprite Cat's walking across the screen. And I want him to change his costume no matter what arrow key, no matter what direction I'm telling him to go in. So I'm going to place that at the end of every single one of my scripts. And now, as I hit my arrow keys, it looks like Sprite Cat's walking across the screen. So that's pretty cool. And then one more thing with Sprite Cat. Some of you may like the speed he's walking at right now. Some of you might want him to go slower or faster. The way we can change that is I'm going to click inside of how many steps I want Sprite Cat to move every time I hit the arrow, right? Because right now he's moving 10 steps. The bigger that number gets, the more distance Sprite Cat will cover every time that the arrow key hits, which will in turn make him look like he's moving faster, right? So I'm going to change all mine to 20 to make Sprite Cat move a little faster. And then same thing, if I were to make that 5, I were to make it lower, Sprite Cat moves a smaller amount. He moves a smaller distance every time I hit that arrow key, which will in turn make him move slower. So I made mine go faster. Oops, didn't mean to hit that. All right, so now I made him move 20 steps, and now he moves across my screen much faster. So I'm going to keep that at 20. And I'm also going to change his size up a little bit too. So the way we can change the size of our sprites, our characters, is we can go here to this size bubble, and I can click inside, and I want to make him a little smaller. If I wanted to make him bigger, I might put in 150, which will make him super big, but I'm not really into that. We're going to change it to maybe 50. Made that number smaller to make Sprite Cat size smaller. Maybe a little bigger. Let's do like 75. That's good. Okay. So now let's get our crystal randomly bouncing around the screen. Off the bat, let's make it a little bigger so we can see it a little better. Let's do 125. I changed that right over here again. Okay, so the way we're gonna make our crystal randomly bounce around the screen is we're gonna go into events off the bat. Remember how I said the way I'm starting my game is I'm hitting the green flag? So this time, this is a specific situation. This is the event that the computer is checking for. in order to begin running the code that we're going to place underneath. So when the green flag clicked, and what I want it to do is I want it to start making this crystal randomly start bouncing around the screen, right? So I'm going to go into motion because, again, this has to do with how the crystal's moving. And I'm going to look through here, see if you can find it yourself, something to make it go randomly around the screen. So I'm going to grab this glide 1 second to random position block. And the reason I didn't grab this go to random position is because, well, actually, let's look. Let's grab this go to random position. So every time I hit the green flag, it'll go to a different spot on the screen. So something you may notice here is it doesn't really look a ton like the crystal is traveling to a random spot. It kind of just appears, right? It kind of looks like it spawns randomly on the screen and it disappears and appears in a different spot, right? I'm going to keep hitting my green flag. So I want it to actually look like this diamond is moving across the screen, not just randomly disappearing and appearing in a new spot, which is why I'm going to grab this glide 1 second to a random position block. So now I'm going to hit the green flag. And now we can actually see it traveling to a random spot on the screen. So every time I hit that flag, it does that. But you may notice I don't want to have to keep hitting the green flag every time I want the diamond to move. I just want the crystal to move randomly every second, right? Go to a new spot every second. I don't want to have to keep hitting this flag. So the way we can tell this block to repeat is, okay, maybe I'm going to grab a bunch of these blocks and tell them to go one after another after another. Well, okay, let's do that. Okay, so it is moving across the screen to random spots, but it still didn't go for a very long time. It only went for, I guess, 4 seconds, right? Because we told it to go to a different spot every second. We have 4 of those blocks. I wanted to do that over and over and over again, pretty much until I stopped the game. So I'm going to get rid of these blocks. And instead, I'm going to replace them. The way you can delete blocks, by the way, is you grab from where you want to start separating them. So if I wanted to start separating this glide block and when green flag clicked, I would grab from here. But since I want to leave one of these glide blocks, I'm going to grab from the second one, since I want to separate between the first and second. I'm going to drag it, and I'm going to just drag it back to where we normally find our blocks. And I'm going to let go, and that'll delete them all. So I've let go, and they've all deleted here. So the way we can tell this block to constantly repeat without actually having to grab a ton of them is I'm going to go over to control, and I'm going to grab this, what looks like a very giant block with a space in it, but it's called a loop. It's called a forever loop. Okay, and it kind of looks like there's a little bit of a space where I could actually place this block inside, which is exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to place this block inside this forever loop, and I'm going to reattach them all together in one script. You always want to make sure that your scripts are pretty much all attached together. If they're detached at a point, they're not going to run. And so what's going to happen now is this forever loop is going to tell this block to repeat over and over and over and over again, right? See how we notice how there's even like that white arrow at the bottom? It's just going to tell it to go over and over and over again. And I can place multiple blocks in here if I wanted to, but I don't want to for today. We just want it to keep randomly gliding to a different spot on the screen. So this is the same as if you were to have an infinite amount, if you were to have a million and a million and a million glide blocks, one after another, because they'll just keep repeating the same action. But here we're able to do that with simply 2 blocks and get the same result. So now I'm going to hit the green flag. I've only clicked on it once. Notice how this script continues to be highlighted in yellow. And now our crystal knows to keep moving to a random position forever. And the way we can get it to stop is I'm going to hit that stop sign right next to it, and that's the way we can get it to stop. When I hit the green flag, it's randomly moving around. All right. So now let's get our parrot chasing our cat around the screen. I'm going to make sure I'm clicking on the parrot sprite to move to a new workspace. So now I have a clean workspace because we haven't added any code to our parrot yet. And the way I'm going to get the parrot to know where sprite cat is first off the bat, typically we're always just going to grab our event block. So I want the parrot to start moving as soon as my game starts. So I'm going to grab my when green flag clicked. And then what I'm going to do to figure out how to get it to move towards Sprite Cat is I'm going to look inside of motion again, because it has to do with how the parrot is moving around the screen, right? And I'm going to grab this point towards block. And when I click inside of this, similar to that event block we used when it came to getting the Sprite Cat to move in different directions, I can click inside of this oval and get a little menu for it to point towards different things. Mouse pointer is simply the cursor that's moving around the screen. It's this black dot that's moving around the whole time that you use to select different things. I wanted to point towards Sprite 1. Sprite 1 is the name of my cat here. And you can also change this name if you want to. I'm going to keep it the same, but know that Sprite 1 is my cat. And I want it to point towards my cat. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to attach those two. So when I run this, now see how they kind of know where Sprite Cat is if I were to move this character around the screen. When you click on the script, it will run one time. So I'm going to click on it here and see how Parrot kind of changed what direction it's facing in. So similar to that point in direction block, instead of telling it to point in the direction of a specific arrow, we want this direction to constantly be facing the cat itself. So we can't really figure that out with this arrow over here, right? Because we don't really know where Sprite Cat's going to be, because Sprite Cat's moving all over the place, all over the time, right? So we're going to tell it to face Sprite Cat. And then we wanted to tell it to move towards Sprite Cat. Very, very similar to what we did here before, right? We told it to point in a direction and then move that way. And so I'm going to go into my move 10 steps, and I'm just going to place that right underneath. And something that's really important with this is we want the amount of steps that the parrot moves to be less than the amount of steps that our Sprite Cat moves. Only then is our parrot actually going to be a little slower than our cat, and it's going to give our cat time to actually run away. So after we've grabbed our move 10 steps block, I'm going to change it to be maybe, I'm going to keep my parrot pretty slow. I'm going to keep it at like 5. All right, so let's hit the green flag. So it kind of moved towards Sprite Cat once, and I keep hitting the green flag, right? As I keep hitting the green flag, it moves towards Sprite Cat. But I want the parrot to keep doing that over and over again. Essentially, I want these blocks to continue repeating. And similar to how we got our crystals blocks to repeat, I'm going to go back into control, and I'm going to grab that forever loop. And now Parrot knows to constantly point towards Sprite 1, towards Sprite Cat, and constantly move 5 steps in that direction. And it's never going to stop until I hit that stop sign. So I'm also just going to change its size really quick. Give it a little smaller, but on the screen I'm going to give Sprite Cat a head start. And then I'm going to hit the green flag to begin my game. And now my parrot is moving towards Sprite Cat. So it's still moving a little fast for my liking. I don't like how they're colliding so much, but I'm going to slow down Parrot a little bit more. I'm just going to tell it to move 1 step. Because since it's inside of this forever loop and these blocks are constantly repeating, it is going to move through these blocks very, very quickly. So since it is inside of this forever loop, it is going to read these blocks very quickly. It's going to loop through. It's going to say point towards Sprite Cat and move 1 step towards it. And then again, where's Sprite Cat now? Okay, now I need to keep moving towards Sprite Cat. I'm going to keep checking where Sprite Cat is. I'm going to keep figuring out where he is and keep moving towards him. Right, so it's just going to constantly loop through, hence why it is called a loop. And it's placed around these blocks to know that it needs to loop around this. And notice how there's no room for us to attach a block underneath here. It's very smooth. It's not like how this ridge is where we can attach pieces, because as soon as the code enters a forever loop, it's going to go right back up to the top. No, again, that's why we have that white arrow there, right? It's going to go right back up to the top inside of the loop and keep continuing the code in here forever, that it's never going to get a chance to potentially answer some code that might be below, which is why you don't have the option to attach anything under there in the first place, because again, it's only going to keep repeating and going up to the top. All right, so I'm going to hit my green flag again, test out the slower speed. Okay, that's a bit better to my liking. And again, you guys don't have to necessarily have the same speed. If you want Parrot to be slower or faster, that's up to you. All right. So one more thing we're going to do is we're going to make it look like Parrot is flapping his wings as he flies towards he flies towards our cat. So similar to how we got Sprite Cat to make it look like he's walking, we're gonna grab that next costume block because I'm gonna click inside a Parrot. And when I look inside these costumes, see, one looks like his wings are up and one looks like his wings are down, right? And so when I keep clicking between them, it looks like his wings are flapping, right? So as we tell it to constantly change its costume once again, we can make it look like our Parrot is flying. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start a new script because this, typically the way you wanna section your scripts, create new ones, is you wanna keep it relevant. You want to keep it writing the script for what the task it's trying to complete is. So this script has to do with the motion of it, of how it's moving around the screen, and this script is going to have to do with the way the sprite Parrot looks. Okay, so the way that the Parrot looks versus the way the Parrot moves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my next costume block again from looks, and since I want it constantly changing its costume, you might have picked up on the fact that we're going to need a loop again because we're going to want it constantly changing its costume, constantly looking like the wings are flapping, right? I'm going to do that. But it's super, super fast, right? It kind of almost looks like he has 4 wings now, which is a little silly. The way that's happening is because it's reading this next costume block super, 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 super fast, and it's trying to change that costume so fast that it looks like it's moving so quickly that we're seeing 4 wings. So the way we can tell it to slow down, read this block every few seconds, maybe read it every half a second, right? We're gonna grab this wait block. And so all it's gonna do is when the computer reads this code, it's gonna say, okay, I'm checking for when the green flag is clicked. Okay, it's clicked. Let me enter this forever loop. Okay, I'm gonna switch my costume. Now, before I check to switch my costume again, I'm gonna wait a second. Okay, I've waited a second. Now let me go up to the top again. So it's basically taking a break. It's pausing for a second before it reads the next block or decides it needs to loop back up since it's at the end of this loop. It's taking a second pause before it re-enters the loop at the very top and changes costumes. Now I'm gonna hit the green flag. Now every second that those wings are changing and it looks like he's flying. I want his wings to move a little faster, so I'm gonna say 0.5, which is half of 1. Those wings are moving a little faster now because it's waiting less amount of time every single time that it takes a break. Now it's taking a smaller break between when it switches its next costume. So really quick before it looks like our game's in really good shape right now, but one last thing we're gonna add is we're gonna figure out how to get a sound to play every time that Sprite Cat and our crystal collide, every time they touch each other, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna head over back to my code for my Sprite Cat. I'm gonna make how we can view our blocks a little smaller. So I'm gonna hit that magnifying glass. I'm gonna grab another script. This I'm gonna say when green flag clicked because I want it to happen as soon as we start our game. And basically, I want Sprite Cat to constantly be checking if he's touching the crystal. And when they do touch, that's a specific situation. When these 2 sprites are touching, I want a sound to play. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over to control and I'm gonna grab this block. It kind of looks like a loop, but it does something very, very different. It says if then. I'm gonna attach it right underneath. And so basically what goes inside this shaded hexagon inside of this if then statement is some sort of specific situation that Sprite Cat is going to be checking for. So the specific situation that it's checking for is if Sprite Cat and the diamond are touching. So let's go into sensing, and because it's sensing for a specific situation, and notice how these hexagons are similarly shaped to the one that's here. They are going to fit inside, and I'm going to hit inside of this oval to get a new menu. And again, since I'm inside of my code for Sprite Cat, I'm checking if Sprite Cat is touching the crystal. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to drag it right into that hexagon, and it'll outline in white so we know it can enter. And so now it's entered, they expanded to fit that sensing block. And so now we're checking if Sprite 1 is touching crystal, right? And when they touch, that when they touch portion is what's going to be placed inside. So what do we want to happen when they touch? Well, I want a sound to play. I'm going to go to sounds, and I'm going to say play sound meow until done. And so you can also pick different sounds. Say you don't want meow. I'm going to keep meow, so I'm going to place that in there. But say you wanted a different sound, you can hit this sounds tab, and you can click on this blue circle right here, and you have a whole library you can choose from. So if you, and then you can test out different sounds by hovering your cursor over this play button. And when you've decided on one you like, you can click on it and you've loaded a new sound in. So once you've loaded a new sound into this area, you can go back to your code, and now you've created a little menu to pick between which sounds you want. I'm going to stick with the meow, but if you wanted a different one, that's how you would get it. And so now I'm going to figure out if it worked. So something looks a little off here, right? Here, let's see if we can get our sprite cat and our crystal to touch. Looks like they might have touched right there, but nothing's happening. And notice how this is also not highlighted in yellow. Well, here's the thing. Computers are pretty lazy, and they're only going to run a command one time unless we tell it otherwise. So what's happening is the computer reads this first if statement. It says, am I touching crystal? And maybe right now, maybe it's checking the situation right now. This is how my game is starting, okay? It's checking the situation, says, am I touching crystal? Well, no. So I'm not gonna play the sound. And I'm also never gonna check again. And we want the computer to constantly be checking if it's touching the crystal so that when it does, it will look inside of this if statement and decide to play the sound. So the way we can get it to constantly say, am I touching crystal? Am I touching crystal? Am I touching crystal? Am I touching crystal? Is we place this whole if statement inside of a loop. So we want the computer to constantly be checking. And only when it does happen, when it is touching crystal, it'll play the sound. If it's not touching crystal, it'll just skip over this and it'll go back up to the top and it'll continue checking for when it is. So now let me hit the green flag. And now we played our meow sound. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna figure out how to get our sprite cat to play a sound. I'm sorry, how we're gonna get our parrot to play a sound when it touches sprite cat. So very similarly, we're gonna kind of follow a similar structure. We're gonna go over here, we're gonna grab our event block, this when green flag clicked block, and I'm gonna go over to control to find my if statement. I'm gonna say if then. This time though, we're checking if the parrot and sprite one are touching, right? So again, I clicked on this sprite here to be in this new workspace. So now I'm checking if parrot is touching sprite one. So let's go over to sensing. Let's go over to this block, click inside, and I want to again checking parrot is touching sprite one. So I'm going to select sprite one this time, and I'm going to place it inside of my if statement. And this time I'm going to go on to sound. I wanted to play the bird sound. Let's place it inside. And again, we want it to be constantly checking. So let's do that by placing it inside of a forever loop. So now when I hit the green flag, a bird sound plays. And every time you hit the diamond, a sound plays. All right. And so if at this point you have completed your project, congratulations. Everything looks like it works. You can pick out different backgrounds. You can tell backgrounds constantly switch. This is your chance to explore further on Scratch, but the base of your game is completed. So I want y'all to take a photo with your game, maybe take a video of you playing your game, demonstrating how it works, explaining some of your code, send it to your troop leader. And also, before you're done, before you can say you've completed the requirements to earn your Coding for Good badge, now is the time when I want you to head over to Google Classroom and watch those last two links. Those are video links. One of them is a YouTube video, and another is on Vimeo. And they are both about awesome women who work in computer science and have jobs that maybe you might want to have someday. The first one is about a woman who works at Pixar. It's very, very cool. Maybe you've seen some awesome Pixar movies like Inside Out or Brave. She works at Pixar, and you'll learn about what she does in her job. And another is about a woman who's an engineer who codes in lots of different languages, and you'll learn about her journey and how she became a programmer and how she became interested in it. But I want y'all to know that there are always awesome female leaders in computer science, and that we ladies can do awesome things with code. And you can just learn about different jobs that you might want to have someday if you do decide that this is something you're very interested in, very passionate about, and want to continue exploring with. So as soon as you finish watching those two links, congratulations, you've earned your Coding for Good badge 1. And you should be very proud of yourself. So make sure you finish up, watch those two videos, and then either take a photo with your project and send it to your troop leader, or take a video of you playing your game and explaining how some of your code works. Congratulations.